We're now talking to Jack McHale, who is the former president and CEO of ORBIS, and who is now the MD10 program director. Jack, can you tell us a little bit about what ORBIS does?
Yes, ORBIS is a 29-year-old organization. Mission statement includes preventing and treating global blindness through capacity building and institutional knowledge transfer. In the developed world, ophthalmologists have the latest techniques, the latest equipment. Unfortunately, there's 39 million blind people in the world, and 90% of them live in the developing world. And 80% of those don't have to be blind. So there's almost 32 million people around the globe that don't have to be blind if they had access to or could afford eye care. And ORBIS is trying to attack this travesty. We do it by building capacity. We have a flying eye hospital that flies around the world to Africa, Asia, Middle East. What we do is we have a 2 to 3 week mission in country. We have volunteer faculty from the US, the UK, India, China, who go on these missions, give up a week or two of their time to train local surgeons and medical personnel on the treatment of various eye disease to help eradicate this terrible blight of global blindness.
Now, the flying hospital is very novel. You started off with, many years ago with a DC-8.
Yes, sir.
And now you're using an MD-10.
Well, we started with a DC-8 that was donated by United. And the airplane went in service in 1982. For 10 years, the DC-8 flew around the world, transferring these skills. In the late 80s, the airplane was slightly long in the tooth, and quite frankly, the fuselage diameter didn't lend itself to a hospital environment, because essentially what we have, since we're a capacity building and training organization, the front of the airplane is actually a classroom. The center of the airplane is an operating theater with a recovery room. The DC-8 was so narrow you had to actually leave through the front left number 2 door to the number 4 aft door to go from one end to the other. So in the late 80s, understanding that they'd have to sunset this DC-8, ORBIS reached out to Fred Smith at FedEx and said, gee, you're one of the largest DC-10 operators in the world. We are doctors and surgeons and philanthropists. We don't have any expertise in buying airplanes. Could you source and do the contract for a new flying eye hospital platform? So the FedEx team actually sourced the airplane, did the contract, and the airplane went into mod in 1989 and came out in 1992 as the current flying eye hospital. And with the same general topography, it has a classroom, 50-seat classroom in the front. We have an IT/AV room where we capture all of the surgeries, so we can provide our trainees with a DVD that summarizes the activities of the day. We have a laser room where we actually do both front of eye and rear of eye, cornea and retina laser treatments. We have a simulator on board, again for this capacity building and training. Behind the laser room we have a full operating theater over wing. This is a completely outfitted surgical suite. Behind that we have what's called substerile, and then a recovery room, all housed in the fuselage of a DC-10. It's really a remarkable machine and quite an accomplishment when you try and adhere to and meld and satisfy the requirements of the Joint Commission, JCO for medical, and the FAA.
So when you fly into these out-of-the-way places with a DC-10, that's got to be quite hard to find a runway to handle it, surely.
Well, obviously we do a lot of planning. This isn't a willy-nilly, we're going to jump in the airplane and point to a place on the map. So in addition to the airplane capability, we also like to choose missions that serve the greater good. So we work a year in advance to see if we can work with the medical community in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Syria, in China, to see what kind of expertise we can bring, what kind of tools, equipment, and technical expertise to do the most good with the local population. So it's not only the airplane requirements, it's the medical requirements as well. The DC-10, our airplane's relatively light because we don't have 345 seats. We do have some fairly heavy medical equipment. The airplane's self-sustaining, so we have generators and AC units that we carry in the belly to be self-sufficient when we go into remote locations. But by virtue of the size of the airplane, they're not super remote. I mean, we don't land on unimproved runways. But we'll go to Dhaka in Bangladesh, to Delhi in India, to Addis, Dar es Salaam.
And what do you use for electrical power when you're on the ground?
We have a generator. We have a portable generator that we've modified to run on diesel fuel. Same with the AC, air conditioning, environmental control. So when we land, the crew spends the better part of the landing day and some of the next day setting up the hospital. Because generally speaking, our missions begin with a screening day because, again, with this medical preparation, we've identified literally hundreds of potential candidates for surgery. Now we select them on the basis of, again, leaving the skill behind that does the most good. So it's not really cost effective for us to do a heavy program in ROP, which is a premature baby blinding malady, if there's only 1/10 of 1% in the region. Obviously, cataract is very high on our list because 50% of the people who are blind suffer from cataract.
How many people has Orbis touched over the years?
We do this by extrapolation because we're a capacity building organization. There are other organizations that are fee for service, so they can take a patient with a condition like cleft palate, and they can pay a surgeon to correct the palate, and you can take a picture before and after, and you can count. It's very difficult for us to measure the full impact because we have a very broad range of goods that we use in fighting blindness that don't necessarily lend themselves to a quantitative assessment. We have an e-learning telemedicine program where doctors from around the world on the World Wide Web can go in and consult with a doctor from the UK or the US or Canada or China on a patient. We do e-mentoring. We do e-learning. We have a whole syllabus. So it's very difficult to measure the impact of that tool. We do a lot of antibiotic distribution. Now there you can measure. You can identify the public health worker who distributes Citromax in Ethiopia, for example, and you can understand the number of patients that received that. And you can say we did a good job because we gave out 2.6 million doses of Citromax. But in the capacity building side, it's difficult because if I teach you or improve your skills as an eye surgeon to do cataract, for example, unless we have daily communication, which is logistically impossible, and we do follow up. We come back, we see how you're doing. You know, we're teaching a man to fish. We give him the pole because we give a lot of equipment, and the rod and the reel and the bait, and we keep coming back seeing how he's fishing, but we don't count the fish. So by extrapolation, it's literally millions. There's 245,000 doctors that we've touched in our history. 294,000. So those we can count. But what they did with those skills, there's more of an extrapolation. But the recent WHO predictions on blindness forecasts have now started a downward trend instead of being asymptotic. And it's not just due to Orbis, but it's due to, because there's a lot of causes of blindness as well. So most of the NGOs have contributed to that downward turn. You know, Lions and Sight Savers.
Let's talk about the airplane for a little bit. Who crews the airplane?
FedEx pilots. Well, we have a asterisk. When Orbis started, it was the United DCA. United pilots volunteered. So they set the precedent. So the missions that were flown on the original Flying Eye Hospital DCA were all flown by United volunteer pilots who gave up their time, took vacation, flew to these less than exotic destinations to give something back. When the DC-10 came on board, there were 3 major DC-10 carriers in the States: United, American, and FedEx. United was sunsetting their fleet of DC-10s, migrating it, ironically, to FedEx. So for a period of time, there was a nice, healthy mix of United pilots and FedEx pilots. And then as United shed the airplanes and the pilot base shrunk, the United pilots became retired pilots, not the line pilots, with FedEx management and line pilots. And I think we have 9 remaining United retired pilots, all these many years later, augmenting the FedEx volunteer pilots.
And when you fly out there, you take mechanics with you?
We have 2 mechanics fly on the airplane. They're part of the staff. We have 22 people on the airplane.
And the airplanes turn out to be reliable?
Oh, yes. I mean, we have incidents, of course. And it's very difficult because we don't have a fixed base. We don't really have a home base. The places that we fly don't necessarily have a lot of capability, especially for DC-10s, out of production airplane. So we rely heavily on the aviation community, and they've been very kind. ORBIS encounters technical issues on virtually every flight. I mean, they're not monumental, they're not life-threatening, they're certainly not a safety issue, they don't reflect any kind of lax maintenance program. But airplanes love to fly, and our airplane only flies 150 hours a year. So she doesn't get all the use that she'd like, and she doesn't overnight in the same place every night like a conventional. So we rely on the aviation. FedEx is phenomenal. FedEx gives us technical engineering support, parts. They pay for the C-check. They've actually donated. We're going to sunset the current Flying Eye Hospital, the DC-10, because to continue the pilot story, so United eventually got out of the 10 business, retired United pilots, augmented FedEx. FedEx is now out of the DC-10 business, so our Flying Eye Hospital is an orphan. All of the FedEx pilots are now becoming MD-10, MD-11 pilots. So FedEx, in a very generous mode, donated an MD-10 to ORBIS for the new Flying Eye Hospital. It's an MD-10 Series 30. It has a large cargo door. It's a lot younger than the current Flying Eye Hospital, which was the second one ever built. It's a Series 30, not a Series 10, so we can fly over tech stops that we have to fly with the current airplane. So it saves us time and fuel. So now the challenge is to take a FedEx freighter with a wonderful cockpit and the ability to draw on their crew base and their technical expertise and build a hospital in it, and a classroom in a freighter.
When will the MD-10 Flying Hospital be ready, do you think?
End of next year.
And you'll continue to do the good work?
Yeah, for 20 more.
Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.